Welcome everyone to this webinar on Zerto Virtual Replication 5.0 and on how you're going to be able to turn hybrid cloud talk into hybrid cloud reality. Just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Joshua Stenhouse. I'm the technical evangelist at Zerto, and I'm going to be taking you through this session today. I'm the global lead on the product. I talk to a lot of large accounts that we have around the world. I do the tech comparisons, deep dives, and if you've happened to read my blog on virtuallysober.com, you also know I happen to be seriously addicted to PowerShell. I've worked in virtualization since 2008. I've been a Zerto customer, so I bought, installed, and started using this software that I'm talking about today back in August 2011, and I've worked for Zerto since 2012 in various different roles, from sales, sales engineering, and now up into technical marketing. But I very much stay hands-on, and actually I want to share with you that I am definitely a real person, and this is live, and I'm also going to show you, if you can see behind me here, so over my shoulder here, this is the lab that I'm going to be demoing from for this session today. So hi, welcome to this session. I might actually keep the webcam on so you can see exactly what I'm talking about when I'm referencing the lab and as we go through, and it'll make it a bit more fun. So about the session today, the agenda. What are we going to cover? We're going to talk about the evolution to hybrid cloud, using the right mix of hybrid cloud services. We're going to talk about our first big announcement on this webinar today, then on how Zerto actually enables a hybrid cloud reality. We're going to do a live demo, so fingers crossed. There's caveats. There's always potential things that could go wrong with a live demo, but we're going to be brave and we're going to try this and show you just how cool this technology is. Then I'm going to give you my second big announcement for the day, and then finally we'll wrap up with a Q&A. But there is a questions box. You can see it in front of you right now. Throw questions in there as we go along. The amazing thing is that we've got so many people on this webinar. I already have questions before we've even started, so I will try and answer them as we go along, but we are going to carve up some space at the end to make sure that we get everything covered, and I try and get through as many as possible. So let's be clear. We now live in a 24/7 business world where you've got to maximize uptime and you've got to drive efficiency with a hybrid cloud strategy. Gone are the days where businesses were 9 to 5. Now you've got people accessing all of their applications, their emails, their data 24/7, mobile apps, bring your own device, and they're expecting everything to be always on now that people use cloud services on the day-to-day basis for home, like Facebook, like sharing files, you name it, sharing pictures. They expect the same level of uptime from the business, and the business has to deliver this while continuing to drive efficiency. And one of the best ways of doing that is adopting a hybrid cloud strategy. And when we talk about hybrid cloud, what do we mean and how did we get there? Well, we started with physical servers. Everybody knows these. Some people still might even have some of these in their environment for certain use cases. We then moved to virtualization for one, consolidation, using less resources and being able to do more, and two, the agility to do things much faster and have new features like high availability vMotions, or even make disaster recovery more simple, because now a VM is essentially a container of your application, your operating system, and the data that allows you to move it around and turn it on anywhere. So virtualization was very good for DR. The next phase that we now see is the software-defined data center and moving more and more technologies up into the hypervisor, removing that physical lock-in, and that is what is then going to allow you to take this to the next level and start to consume different cloud services depending on what is the right mix for your environment. And it's safe to say that it's not just me saying this, not just Zerto, the industry is saying that hybrid cloud is the future of the enterprise, and at least 70% of enterprises will be using or pursuing a hybrid cloud strategy by 2017. And this could be a mix of on-premise, public cloud, managed provider services. It all depends on what makes sense for you. But there is a tendency when we talk about using the public cloud to think, okay, so I'll look at moving all my workloads to the cloud, and that's going to be a good use case. But what we're finding is that as public cloud evolves and people get more used to looking at how they might actually use it, if you migrate all of your production workloads today into the cloud and you're running them all at 100% tilt for the next 1 to 3 years, this can be more expensive. Somebody's making a profit margin on this, and yes, you've managed to remove quite a lot of complexity behind the underlying infrastructure, But if you're running all of your traditional workloads today in the public cloud for the next 3 years, maybe 5 years, it can be more expensive than doing it yourself. And we're seeing this proven out. We've seen early adopters in the last few years start to bring workloads back on premise because it's not the right choice for all. You've got latency, control, compliance issues that means you might not want to move production to the cloud. But when we talk about the right mix, what is a good use case is DR. Why? Because you're using the cloud for burst capacity. And the best example of burst capacity I can give you is an actual disaster. In a disaster, what do you need in your DR side? You need a huge amount of compute, of IOPS, throughput, of the storage on demand so that you can turn everything on and get it up and running in minutes. And if you look at what the public cloud was made for, it was made for Black Friday, for Christmas, for those high demand events where, for example, Amazon needed to scale up to service 10 times the normal amount of users on an average day. And this is where using the public cloud makes sense, when you're using it for the same thing that it was created for and only paying for what you use. And a hybrid cloud strategy, therefore, doesn't have to be just moving everything into the cloud. It's moving different elements of your infrastructure or your applications depending on what is the right mix to drive efficiency in your organization and to ultimately turn around to your CTO, to the board, and say, I have a hybrid cloud strategy. This is how we are leveraging the cloud to drive efficiency, to save money, to improve our processes. And this is an example of a really effective mix that a lot of organizations are looking at. And when you look at this burst capacity and drill down, what does this mean in terms of my actual environment? Let's look at a typical distribution of VMs that you might see. You're going to have a huge spread of lots of small VMs doing multitudes of different operations. It could be back-end IT processes, it could be Active Directory, web front ends, load balancers. You can have a huge host of these small VMs in your environment with a few gig of RAM, a couple of CPUs, and a few 100 gig disk, and driving a few IOPS. You then might have a solid core of some gruntier VMs in there with 4 CPUs, maybe a bit more RAM, a bit more storage and SSDs. And then we come to maybe your tier 1 VMs. Your tier 1 VMs, they're high on CPU, high on IOPS, high on RAM, and these are driving the lifeblood of all the applications that are driving the business forward. And then you've got the big daddies. Everybody's got one of these as a minimum, maybe a few of them, maybe a whole host of them, where you've got that one server, the group of servers where it's got high CPU, high amount of RAM, it needs those IOPS. And if you look at this distribution of VMs, it's pretty typical across the board, except some organizations might have 100 times this or 5 times this. But if you look, this is in production. What do you need if you're going to provide your own on-premise DR site to service running all of these VMs at maximum performance? And it's no good having them reduced on a lower platform running in a degraded state and then telling the business now your 20,000 users can fail over and start using these. If these aren't performing to the maximum level, then even though they're powered on, they're as good as being off and you haven't really recovered from the disaster. So in the DR side, with all these CPUs, RAM, how many hosts do you need? How many hypervisor hosts are you going to have provisioned, sat there, powered on, waiting for that disaster, so you've got that capacity to service all these CPUs, to service all this RAM in the event of that disaster? How much storage are you going to need for servicing all these IOPS, for servicing multitudes of terabytes of data across all these VMs that constantly is growing? And making sure that it can not only cope with the day-to-day and the growth, but the burst capacity that you need where you've got a boot storm. If you're powering on 500 VMs, it's not the same as day-to-day operation in your primary data center where everything is always on and you might have a couple of VMs rebooting here or there if you had a host failure, but it's certainly never a very rare event that you turn everything on at once. So there's a whole different ballgame between general operation and powering everything on. And then we've got everything else. We've got the building, we've got managing all of these different elements. We've got the people to manage the DR site. We've got all the different applications, all the licensing the hypervisors. And then the real kicker is that every 3 to 5 years, you've got to refresh all of this. You've got to renew your licensing, got to buy new servers, got to buy new storage, got to link it all together and manage it. It's a huge headache to have all of this complexity just for that burst capacity in the event of a disaster. And if we compare this to the public cloud, you've got limitless capacity on demand, cost effective because you're just paying for what you use, and ultimately it's simple because all of this, as you know, is just through a web interface. Somebody else is paying for managing the back end, and you're just get a recurring monthly cost per VM per terabyte, and it makes it simple. And yes, the cloud is ultimately somebody else managing the servers and the storage and giving you a nice front end and a per VM per month cost, but it makes it simple. And when you can start to consume the cloud in a way that makes sense, i.e. bursting capacity for DR, I think I'm pretty confident in saying that in the next 5 to 10 years, the whole concept of trying to do your own DR site altogether is going to start to go the way of physical servers. Yes, there's going to be some niche use cases. Yes, there might be a certain percentage out there still doing it, but it's not going to be the norm. The norm is going to be using the cloud in the right mix in a hybrid cloud architecture and how it makes sense. But a key problem in how you consume this, and it's often the one thing that nobody talks about when they're connecting platforms, is how you actually move the data from one cloud to another in order to make this hybrid cloud a reality. And the good news is that you already know how we do that, because you probably already heard about Zerto and the fact that you're on this webinar. In that when we GA'd back in 2011 and we moved the replication and the automation up into the hypervisor, we made it software defined, we made it simple, and we removed the lock-in. And this allowed you to replicate between any different storage, between your on-prem data centers, between different hypervisor versions, different vSphere versions, but it also importantly allows you to then free up your environment and replicate to the cloud. And if you look at the trend since 2011, what are the latest technologies that are all being moved into the hypervisor that were once previously physical? Software-defined networking. Look at VMware NSX. It's one of the hottest things that everybody's talking about if you went to one of the last 2 VMworlds. Software-defined storage, vSAN. Zerto did the exact same thing for replication and recovery orchestration back in 2011. And what I can tell you that means is that by 2016, we are very, very good at it. So what does it mean once you've virtualized the replication and included all the orchestration? The first thing is it gives you resilience for evolving IT, because you can change. You've removed that lock-in, so you're agnostic to the underlying storage and the hypervisor. Within your production site, your DR site, you can bring in that new all-flash array from a new storage vendor, and you don't have to rip out all your existing storage investment, or you can move to a different hypervisor or go between different hypervisor versions and protect all of your VMs across these disparate technologies, reduce the impact of downtime and data loss, recover to any point in time, and prove that recovery with testing, which allows you to remove risk. And it's going to allow you to recover anything in minutes, which is maximizing your uptime, and also allowing you to use the same technology to do migrations between hypervisors, between different data centers, or up into the cloud. And that's the next important point, is that by removing that lock-in to the storage layer and virtualizing that replication, you can evolve. You can consume the cloud. You can replicate to over 300 different clouds, 300 around the world. That's huge, including Azure, AWS, the IBM cloud, you name it. Zerto supports. Wherever you are, there is going to be a cloud that suits you in the right location. And all of this is from one single interface. One solution for your on-premise, replicating to the cloud, whether that's today or tomorrow. Zerto is going to be the solution that takes you there. So the first big announcement that I have today is GA. So you've heard about Zerto Virtual Application 5.0 for the last couple of months. I'm really excited today to say that it is now GA'd. You can go and download and install this, and you can start using it, start trialing it today. And the key features in 5.0 are one, Microsoft Azure, one-to-many replication. We've extended the journaling out to 30 days, and we've also included a new mobile app, and all of these I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, and I'm going to show you in the demo. But before we get to the demo, I want to do a quick refresher for everybody new to Zerto, maybe hasn't looked at Zerto for quite a while, on how Zerto works, and then we'll expand that into a hybrid cloud architecture. So the first thing that you install in your on-premise virtual environment is the Zerto Manager, and this Zerto Virtual Manager plugs into your vCenter or your System Center to manage the replication. Now it's just the management, and you have one per data center for the simple reason that if you lose access to production, you have a Zerto Manager here to log into to initiate the failover. It's not doing the replication. That's handled by our virtual replication appliances that you deploy onto each ESXi or Hyper-V host that you're replicating from and to. And there are two key reasons why you deploy these onto each host. One, as you vMotion the hosts, Zerto can see the VMs move and carry on replicating them. And two, it's scale out. So the same Zerto software can protect a 15 VM environment to a 5,000 VM environment because you simply have more hosts, therefore more replication horsepower for sending all of the replication traffic. These appliances are very small. They're 1 vCPU, 3 gig of RAM, 12 gig of disk space, and a static IP. And they have built-in compression of the replication traffic. You can throttle that over the IP link in working hours, and they have built-in resilience to any WAN outages. The replication itself is real-time, near-synchronous replication of just the block-level changes. If nothing is changing, nothing is replicating, and as those block-level changes occur, a copy is sent in memory to the local appliance, which then compresses, replicates, and inserts it in the target site within seconds. And this is all done with no snapshots, no performance impact, and it's constantly tracking and streaming and maintaining the order of those block-level changes to ensure consistency of all the data in the recovery site, giving you the RPO and data loss in just seconds. And in the recovery site, or wherever you select to replicate to, we're just creating virtual disks. We have a replica of the virtual machine, and we have a journal virtual disk for point-in-time recovery. And because you're just replicating VMs and creating virtual disks, this is how Zerto is storage agnostic and allows you to go from anything to anything, between completely different storage vendors, different LUN configurations, or even different hypervisors and clouds themselves. And the journal is what allows you to rewind back in time. Importantly, as I just mentioned, in 5.0, this can now be up to 30 days of history, and all this data is compressed to maintain storage efficiency. And as a general rule of thumb, we recommend 7 to 10% additional space overhead for that journal-based recovery. So protecting 100 terabytes of VMs, no snapshots in production, your replicas are going to be 100 terabytes plus 10 terabytes for the journal-based point-in-time recovery, so you can have that granularity of rewinding back in time, which I'll show you in the demo. So how does this scale up, and how do we plug this in to a hybrid cloud architecture and make hybrid cloud a reality? Well, we have our on-premise Zerto virtual replication infrastructure here, the Zerto Manager, the VRAs. And a cool thing in 5.0, and one of the most powerful things, in fact, is our new feature of one-to-many replication. And this gives you simultaneous local and multiple remote replicas. And you can plug in this Zerto infrastructure into any different of the target clouds that we support. So this could be into Azure, it could be into AWS. All these different target clouds, Zerto is going to allow you to plug into. So just to give you some examples here, let's talk about the Zerto in Azure. What do we need there? You go into the Azure Marketplace, you can deploy a VM from that marketplace that gives you it pre-configured, and you're going to deploy a D3 V2 VM. And on there, you're going to install the Zerto Cloud Appliance software. And the Zerto Cloud Appliance software is simply a combination of a virtual manager and a virtual replication appliance in one. And the two reasons you have this are, one, you need an interface to log into to actually click failover if you lose access to production. And two, it's writing all of the replica data into a storage account as cheap blob storage. Page blobs for the disks and block blobs for the journal point-in-time recovery. So if you want to have an extended journal, maybe keep it up to 30 days, you can do that into your recovery site in the cloud and use that cheap blob storage. Maybe you want to replicate into Amazon instead. In Amazon, simply deploy an M4 extra large EC2 instance, deploy the ZCA, and instead of storing it in a storage account that doesn't exist in Amazon, it's just going to be stored in S3. Again, cheap cloud storage. Now, with each of these, you have to pre-configure the networking. Zerto doesn't include the networking by default, so it needs to be a VPN, it could be a direct connect, an express route, whatever it is you need to connect, pre-configure that into your target cloud, and then deploy Zerto on top. Or even easier, if you're using a Zerto cloud service provider, they can give you things like MPLS, VPNs into the private cloud, and they will give you a ZCC, that's a Zerto Cloud Connector. And that's very simply, it's just a VM with 2 NICs that's allowing you to replicate into their secure replication network. And the best thing about a Zerto cloud service provider in this hybrid cloud architecture is that you're getting all the benefits of using the cloud, getting that cheap storage, getting that burst capacity. But in this scenario, there's no conversion of the VM or data whatsoever, because all of the Zerto cloud service providers are running vSphere natively. So you get the power of the cloud, but native VMware platform. So that's going to make sure that you've got the lowest recovery time objective possible, and all the added benefits of having that managed service around onboarding, testing, compliance, etc. So all of these different use cases, all from the same solution, with the added benefit now in 5.0 of having this one-to-many replication, where you can have a local copy. You don't have to just recover to the cloud. You could have a local replica, maybe between different storage arrays in production, from your storage array to some local storage between clusters, and this is going to allow you to recover anything to production in minutes. It could be individual VMs. You could do file-level restores from those VMs, recover entire apps, and this is all direct to production in just 2 or 3 minutes maximum, could be even less, at maximum performance using the same software. And for each of the replication groups that you configure into the target cloud, you can have different journaling retention policies. You could maybe have a local replica with 24-hour journaling and point-in-time recovery, but you don't want to do more than 24 hours because you don't want to configure that much of your production, maybe flash storage for this space. Great. Have a second protection group replicating into Azure and keep that up to 30-day retention all in one solution, which is allowing you to not only replicate on-premise today, but you could switch to this next week, switch to this in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. You're getting one solution that allows you to adopt the hybrid cloud, or have a strategy in place that you could adopt it when the time is right for your organization, because some companies say, I'm never looking at public cloud. And this might have been an organization 2 years ago, and I could bet $10 that I could go to that same organization today and I might hear a completely different thing. Now we're looking at hybrid cloud and we want to know how we can use Azure, how we can use a Zerto cloud service provider. And Zerto is the solution that's going to enable you to do that and get that right mix. Now, the next thing I want to touch on that's very important when we talk about how you use a hybrid cloud is how you're going to protect and move your enterprise applications. And if you look at a typical enterprise application where you've got maybe a firewall, you've got load balancers, web server VMs distributing traffic where it's storing data on some file server VMs, maybe you've got some index servers to give up-to-date results on what they're searching for in the app, and then you've got some database servers on the back end driving and being the powerhouse behind this app. So this is, for example, a 12 VM application, and all of these VMs are constantly updating each other every few seconds with every transaction, every user logging in. Now, if you're replicating and protecting these without consistency grouping and each VM is at its own individual point in time, what point in time can I recover this 12 VM application stack to? If, for example, the web servers are only 15 minutes out of date, maybe the file servers are 8 hours out of date because they've got a reasonable amount of change, but the index and the file servers are 12 and 24 hours out of date. Yes, I've got a copy of all these VMs in the DR side, but if I turn this on, what point in time is the data consistent to? I don't know. I'm handing over this broken application to my DBAs, the application owners, where they've got to manually go and fix the discrepancies between all the different components, where you might have a database server referencing files that haven't been replicated yet, or files on a file server that somebody created as part of a customer record that aren't in the index server or the database server. It's a mess. And this is just one application. Scale this to 2 applications, 3 applications. And it can become quite obvious that even if you put on a data sheet that something supports replicating 1,000 VMs to a cloud, if it doesn't have consistency groupings, then it's not consistent and it's not scalable. Compare this to consistency grouping replication, where you can recover the entire stack to the same point in time just a few seconds in the past, whether it's the 12 VM application, a 5 VM application, or multiple stacks of applications, all to the same point in time just a few seconds in the past. And this is what makes the recovery consistent and scalable. And this is what Zerto is going to give you in this hybrid cloud solution, where we're taking the one consistency grouping mechanism that you had in storage-based replication, moving it into the hypervisor, and giving you simple, scalable protection and recovery of the VMs, not underlying LUNs. You can't do that when you're replicating to the cloud. And you can recover and protect all of those VMs that form your application stacks together to the same point in time, to previous points in time with the journaling. We'll give you right ordering, fidelity, consistency of the application stack. And on this protection group is where you pre-configure all the recovery settings, like what networks do I want to connect the VM to when I fail over this VM to Azure, what IP address, what security groups, which VPC in AWS do I want to connect the VMs to, how do I configure this on a per NIC basis. This is all done on this virtual protection group to automate the recovery. And once you created this protection group, all the day-to-day changes that you make in a virtual environment are going to continue to work. There's no impact to doing a vMotion, storage vMotions. If you add a disk, the new disk is synchronized. So all the reasons why you use virtualization, you can carry on doing them, and Zerto is going to carry on replicating with this consistency, whether it's on-premise or to the cloud. And the next key thing is you have the same consistent interface across all these different clouds. It doesn't matter whether you're replicating to your own data center, maybe to Hyper-V, to Azure, to AWS, to a Zerto cloud service provider. You have the same interface that you can log into to initiate the recovery, and it's so simple, it removes the reliance on individuals. So many organizations out there, you speak to them, you say, how many people would it take to recover? And how many of those people would you have to get out of bed at 4 a.m. if you had a disaster? And quite often, it's a lot more than you think, or it's a lot more when they start to document the processes involved. And Zerto removes that reliance because failing over is a simple 4-step process. Step 1, you click failover. Step 2, you select the applications. Step 3, you verify which point in time you want to recover to. And going back to previous points in time is a single checkbox you can see on the screen here. Single checkbox, select that point in time. If you want to go back an hour, 4 hours to yesterday at 2 p.m., it's a single checkbox. You don't have to recover it and then get your DBAs in and start replaying transaction logs. You have a right order consistent point in time, select it, and it will rewind and automatically go back to that point in time. It doesn't get easier than this. And then step 4, you click failover. 4 steps, anybody can do that. And now your DR plan can be as simple as this 4-step process from an IT perspective, allowing you to take the rest of the DR plan to focus on everything else that people quite often forget. Like, how do I even access the applications if I've lost my primary office? So what happens when you click failover? In the recovery side, we're going to automate the recovery by bringing all the virtual machines online, attaching the disks, whether it's virtual disks from your vSphere environment, attaching the pageboard disks in an Azure environment, and then we're going to automatically change IP addresses, run through all those pre-configured settings, and it will give you a recovery time objective of minutes. Just minutes, whether it's to vSphere, to Azure, to Hyper-V, you're going to have an RTO of minutes. You can also test this recovery. So same 4-step process, click to do a test, and we'll bring all the VMs online in an isolated bubble network, and you can verify how will my VMs behave once I've moved them from vSphere to Azure, from vSphere to Hyper-V. You can test that out in working hours and see for yourself. And because you can now do a local replica, this isolated test could be in a local bubble. And at that point, if you've got all the VMs, all the applications online in 2 minutes, you can pull any data you need and restore any level object that you require on a granularity that no backup solution can ever achieve, because Zerto journals are every few seconds with no snapshots and no impact. So you can remove the need to try and do your backups during the day to minimize data loss from, for example, ransomware infections, because you could just do a failover test, pull the data out. Or you could do a Zerto file level restore and do the same without even having to instigate the test. You can also take clones of the VMs, so you can use that to extend protection to create high quality dev test environments. And Zerto also gives you the same 4-step process for doing migrations. So it could be small to large scale migrations, and you can move all the VMs in just the same few clicks in minutes. And because the replica data is seconds of lag behind production, you can test before you actually move. And then it's just as powerful for migrations as it is disaster recovery. Finally, fail back is as simple as a single checkbox where we automatically reverse the replication back to your production site, remembering the previous settings and only sending the block level changes. Yes, if you're replicating into the public cloud, Azure and AWS, failback is currently a manual process. If you need the benefits of replicating to the cloud and you want that single checkbox failback capability today, then we have over 300 Zerto cloud service providers on a native VMware cloud that are going to give you that capability today. But the cool thing I can also tell you is that we already have planned and we already have proof of concepts running internally of reversing the replication from Azure, having the same real-time replication back. And that is going to be coming in 2017 with an in-place upgrade. So you'll be able to use it today, in-place upgrade, and then next year you'll have that native failback capability from Azure as well. So without further ado, let's switch across to a quick demo and let's show you exactly what I've been talking about in my lab over here and showing you exactly how you can plug this into a multitude of different environments and have replication both locally, on-premise to a secondary site, and to Azure, all from the same interface. So let's switch across to my demo environment here. And here you can see I have a Zerto Virtual Manager, and I have it plugged into my VMware environment. So let's just switch across, and I'll expand out exactly what I've got here. So I've got two VMware data centers. In my first VMware data center, I've got two clusters. So I've got cluster 1 and cluster 2. And then in my secondary data center, I have a DR cluster that you can see here. Here I have my Zerto Manager that's plugged into this vCenter. Again, you have one Zerto Manager plugged into every single vCenter that you're replicating from and to. And I also have a Zerto Manager running up in Azure. So if I come across to Azure here, I can click on the VMs. And in Azure here, I only have one VM running, which is my Zerto Cloud Appliance. And even though I have replication running here, there are no VMs running in the public cloud until I click to failover or test. And this is what makes Zerto so cost effective when replicating to the public cloud, because you've just got the management VM and then everything else is just stored as the cheap blob storage. So we come back to Zerto and we look and we go across to sites. This is where you pair Zerto to all of the different clouds that you want to replicate to. So here you can see I have it paired to my target VMware data center in DC2, which is also in Boston, the same as production, and I have it paired to US West in Azure. And if I click on VPGs, here you can see I have a protection group that is replicating with a sub 20-second RPO. So here I have 3 VMs with a sub 20-second RPO replicating from the lab behind me to the west coast of the US in an Azure region. And you can see that, so DC1 to Azure, sub 20-second RPO, no snapshots, no performance impact. And because these are all in a virtual protection group, this is again the consistency grouping of these VMs. So all of these are going to be recovered together to the exact same point in time, just a few seconds in the past. Pretty powerful. Just at my home lab here, an Azure account, put in my credit card details, deployed the ZCA from the marketplace, put in a VPN between the two, paired the sites, away I go. I'm now getting replication real time into the public cloud. And this is how Zerto makes the hybrid cloud a reality. But that's just the replication. What about actually orchestrating the recovery? Well, the first thing you've got to do is actually create the protection group and pre-configure all the settings that you need in order to have that automated recovery. So if we go to creating a protection group, first we give it a name and specify the priority. I can select from the list of any unprotected VM in my environment, or with the multi-target replication, here I can select any VMs that are already protected in existing virtual protection groups. So again, this is a new feature in 5.0 that allows me, if I wanted to take these 3 VMs that I already have replicating into Azure. So let's do that first. I can define the boot order to make sure the VMs come online in the correct order. And I already have these replicating into Azure, so I don't want another copy in Azure. That serves no purpose. But what if I wanted a local copy, or a copy in my secondary data center? Maybe I'm going to do a local copy, and these are in my DC cluster 1. I'm going to replicate this to DC cluster 2 and have a local copy for direct restores to production in the case of an individual application failure or VM failure, I now don't have to accept the latency impact of failing over to the public cloud. I can use the same solution to recover it locally. How powerful is that? Pretty powerful. Let's say I want to configure some new VMs and I actually want to replicate into the public cloud. So let's create a new protection group. Again, give it a name. We'll leave the priority as medium. And I'm going to select these 3 VMs here that form my second application stack. So if we click Next, Recovery Site, and then Azure, first we can configure the journal history. So it's a minimum of 1 hour, a maximum of 30 days of retention in that cheap blob storage. Because I'm replicating up into the public cloud, I don't want as tight an SLA on my recovery point objective. If this was local, I might have 5 minutes. Maybe to the public cloud, I have less bandwidth, so I'm going to put this at an hour. So it's only if the RPO goes above 1 hour that I get an alert. But if it's below 1 hour, then Zerto is always replicating the block level changes. If it can do a 0-second RPO, it will, because if nothing is changing, nothing is replicating. And then we configure a test reminder. We can configure a temporary database disk. So if you have a SQL or Oracle database, put that on its own disk. Select the checkbox here, and this will save you typically 50% of the bandwidth for that SQL or Oracle VM because we're not replicating those block level changes. And this is where I'm sure you find in the juicy bit. What do I connect this VM to? Where am I replicating it to? So whatever Azure region you have your ZCA deployed in, it's going to give you a list of all the VM networks, the subnets, the network security groups, and all the instance families and sizes available. And these are all the defaults for the protection group. So I can, for example, select a production VM network for an actual failover, and then a test VM network for a test failover. I can isolate it. One's routable to production, one is an isolated bubble, maybe on a completely different subnet that is not routable. So I can then have this isolated bubble to do my DR testing in working hours. I can apply different network security groups. Maybe I want different networking policies and inbound and outbound security rules for each of these different groups of VMs or protection groups. And then we have the instance families. So this is when we talked about the sizing earlier in the presentation. Those VMs that you have where you have a 2 vCPU VM with a few gig of RAM up to the 16 CPU VM with 60 gig of RAM. Think about this. This is just a checkbox. So if I want all my VMs now to be D series and I want them to have 16 cores, 112 gig of RAM, I just clicked a box. Did I have to go and buy all these hypervisor hosts with this huge amount of RAM to have this capacity ready to run this size VM in the DR site? No, I didn't. I just had to select a box when creating the VPG. It doesn't get easier than this. And of course, this is the standard selection. This is the default list for this protection group. More than likely, within the protection group and the application stack, you've got VMs of completely different sizes. So on a per VM basis, you can then select the VM, and individually you can select a different instance size and give it its own pre-allocated private IP address. And the great news is you can test this out. So you can test out the different sizes. Maybe you actually wanted to give the VM more resources in production, but you can't because it's not available. In the DR site, that's not a problem anymore because you're harnessing the public cloud capacity and on-demand scalability. So maybe for this VM, I only want a standard D11. So one important point here again, though, is these are not running until you actually click to fail over or test. So yes, these are going to have an incurred cost when you are running them, but that's only when you click to do a failover move or test. So this is an idea of how you do the pre-configuration. So when you click to do the failover or test, Zerto is going to use all of these settings to fully automate that recovery process and bring the virtual machines online in the target hypervisor or the public cloud like in Azure here in just a few minutes. And that is exactly what I want to show you now. So let's come across to VPGs. You can see I have a warning on here, and this is actually a very useful warning, and it's telling me that the Microsoft default SAN policy might cause the disks to be brought in the VM in an offline state. And so this is just telling me that I need to log into this VM. I need to make sure that I'm pre-configuring the SAN policy so that when I bring this online in Azure, that it can see all of its data disks and access them, and they're automatically mounted. I don't have to do that myself. And once I configured this, I can dismiss the alert and remove it from here. So let's now do a test failover. And when you do a test failover, Zerto is going to automatically create a new resource group in Azure with the name of the virtual protection group. So if I come across to resource groups, here in my Azure portal here, you can see I've got a management group and one for in the UK West and a management group in West US. So what we're going to see is a new protection group created for this Azure CRMAP1 VPG with 3 VMs in it. And to show you that point-in-time recovery capability I promised you is just a single checkbox where you can rewind. Look at the granularity I have here. 11:43:47. I can go back to 11:11:37. I can go back to 10:16 a.m. This is the level of granularity that Zerto's journaling gives you with the point-in-time recoverability of just a single checkbox. But I'm just simulating a site-wide outage, not a logical failure. It's not a ransomware infection where I need to rewind. I'm just going to go to the latest point in time, and we're going to click Next, and then Start Failover Test. And now the cool thing that Zerto is going to do is simulate that entire test without shutting down the VMs in production and without breaking the replication for the entirety of the test. So you can do this DR testing in working hours, in minutes, and see for yourself just how quickly you can get all of your production VMs running online in the DR site. And it is absolutely going to blow you away just how fast this is, because you can already see that we're already at 74%. And I'm not making this up. This is running right in front of you right now. This is the power of having that public cloud. Capacity on demand. How many it's not ESXi, but how many Hyper-V hosts does the Azure cloud have running on the back end to make this possible? Probably more than I could ever count. I don't know. But the beauty is I don't need to know. I don't need to manage it because I'm using the public cloud. And I've got this capability here where if I come across to the recovery site, we can now see the Azure CRMAP1 resource group has been created, and Zerto is now going to start populating this with the test failover VMs as they're created on the fly. So you can see I've got database, testing, recovery, file, web, and each of them's got the network adapter attached. And again, I can now do this DR testing. I can see how these VMs behave without ever shutting them down in production. All of my users, even though there's none obviously using my lab right now, would carry on working. They'd carry on doing their day-to-day operations. This data is still replicating into the public cloud, yet I'm now simulating this failover. I can test out all these different applications. I can see how my SQL database VM now behaves now that it's running maybe at a higher instance size in Azure. It's now running in the public cloud. It's not on-premise on vSphere anymore. How does it behave? How does it perform? How does it interact? Is the data consistent? Does the application work? And you can see that this VM is already now powered on. Quick note here that you can see that my connect icon here is grayed out. Why? Well, if you think about this connect here, it's actually using remote desktop. And this VM doesn't have a public IP assigned. Yes, it's got its own IP address, so it could communicate with all the different components. But if I want to connect via the remote desktop here, then I need to assign a public IP. Or if I didn't want to assign a public IP and make it accessible over the internet, it's on an isolated bubble. I have another VM that I could create, bring online in that bubble, and give that an IP address. So if we go to network interfaces, we can see we have the network interface here. We have an overview. We'll go to IP configurations, the primary, and here you can see public IP address disabled. We'll click to assign it one. We'll create one new. I'm fine with the name. Then going to save this. We'll close this down. We'll come back to the VM. You can see it's now saving the network interface in the top right corner and assigning this IP. And if we come back to the overview, there we go. So we can now see the connect button has come online. And yes, this VM's still booting, so I want to give it a few more minutes to turn on. But you can now see that all these VMs are now booted in the recovery site, and I can now do my DR testing And in the production site, all my VMs are still powered on. I can still see all my VMs running in the source cluster. And if I go to the Zerto Manager, I still have the sub 20-second RPO. It does not get more powerful than this, and there is not an easier way in the world for you to try out a hybrid cloud architecture and start to utilize the public cloud than there is to use Zerto Virtual Replication 5.0. So as an action item, after we finish this session, go and download a trial, start testing this out yourself, because it doesn't get more powerful than this. So that concludes my little demo. Hope you found that exciting. The next thing that we added in 5.0 that I mentioned is the ability to have a mobile app to monitor your hybrid cloud solution anywhere, anytime. So if you have, for example, 20 VMware data centers, each replicating to a different Azure region or Amazon or a Zerto cloud service provider, or between your own data centers, using the mobile app, you can monitor this anytime, anywhere. So you can see the RPO across all your VMs. Now, if you look at your existing solutions today, can you do this? If I said, show me your RPO, you might have to look at 4 different solutions, 50 different replication or backup jobs, and then you might be able to say, well, it's this for this, that for this. Can you see that real-time RPO across all of your applications? This is my mobile. This is connected to the lab that you just saw. I could go anywhere right now. I could go on holiday, and I can always see that I'm protected and take this with me anywhere, anytime. And not only that, this gives you the certainty that once you've invested in Zerto, that you know you're protected. And this is across any different cloud. So when you have the power of Zerto, the power of the Zerto mobile, the biggest thing it gives you is peace of mind. Very, very cool. Now, the next big announcement I have is if you have this capability where you can replicate between any different storage array, you can go from vSphere to Hyper-V, Hyper-V to vSphere. You could go to Amazon, Azure, a Zerto cloud service provider. This needed a new way of licensing Zerto, one that was future-proof and that allowed you to utilize all these different use cases and have a hybrid cloud architecture. So my second big announcement is the new version of Zerto Virtual Replication called Enterprise Cloud Edition. And I'm excited about this because this is the first time in the history of Zerto that we've actually brought out a new high tier of the product with a really exciting set of features. So to give you the breakdown of what this means and the different licensing options of Zerto, yes, they're all licensed per VM, and yes, you can continue to buy and consume the traditional essential version of Zerto Virtual Replication between VMware to VMware, Hyper-V to Hyper-V. Yes, you can also use Zerto just for DRaaS to a Zerto cloud service provider. You can use it to a public cloud, or with the Enterprise Cloud Edition, you buy one solution per VM and you can consume any different use case. You can have one-to-many replication to a local data center, to a secondary, multiple different data centers, replicate to any cloud. You can do cross-hypervisor replication, have multi-tenancy, role-based access control, give out self-service capabilities, all from one simple solution that is fully featured and future-proof. Because it doesn't matter whether you're replicating to the cloud today, even if you're still looking at replicating between your own 2 data centers. At the start of the presentation, we talked about hybrid cloud. Anything you buy and install in 2016 going into 2017, it's got to have a cloud angle. It's got to allow you to evolve your IT so that when your next storage refresh, data center move or lease expires, or maybe hypervisor licensing and physical server refresh comes up, you have that option where you don't have to go and retool. You don't have to go and test 10 different solutions. You already bought Zerto. You already know you can go and consume the cloud. And for a lot of people out there, I think this is the start of the end, because you're no longer going to need to go and buy your own DR site anymore. You can evolve and use the cloud, and this is the last DR solution you'll never need to buy. If we look at how the features break out between the different versions, so we have all the features that you know and use, so the real-time replication, near synchronous, RPOs in seconds, RTOs in minutes, the virtual protection group, consistency groupings, journal-based point-in-time recovery, file-level restores, no impact failover testing. All of that is the same across all of these products. But if you want one-to-many replication, that local copy, multiple remote, role-based access control, You want a Zerto Cloud Manager to have multi-tenancy management and give out the users the ability to do failover testing of their own application stacks. On vCloud Director integration, this is all in Zerto Virtual Replication Enterprise Cloud Edition. So this is all available on the website. If you want to go back to this information, we are recording this and sending this out. If you're an existing customer, you can upgrade to Zerto Virtual Application 5.0, but if you want the extra features here, then reach out to your account manager and we'll be able to arrange a quote for an upgrade for you to get this new functionality to future-proof your investment in Zerto. And the next point I want to give is a summary, because I've covered a lot in this session. We've talked about a lot. So what have we talked about? We've talked about how Zerto is enterprise-class software-defined disaster recovery, how it's hypervisor-based, it's virtual aware in that it sees those day-to-day changes, it's for private, hybrid, and public cloud, it's storage and hypervisor agnostic, it's going to allow you to minimize the impact from a disaster because you have an RPO in seconds, and it's scalable because you have this consistency group mechanism with the journal-based point-in-time recovery where you can rewind and recover down to the second, which I showed you in that live demo. It's going to allow you to maximize the uptime with an RTO in minutes, prove your compliance, because that test, as soon as I've stopped it, I can go and drive a PDF report and pull that out from Zerto and then give that to whoever I need to prove the compliance. It's going to allow you to recover individual files from any protected VMs and address multiple other use cases, because you saw how quick that failover test was. Let's think about what else you could use that for. What if you had 400 VMs and you needed to test the latest Microsoft Patch Tuesday? You could spin up that failover test in Azure or your DR site in a couple of minutes, test all your upgrades, check that it works, stop the test, and now when you fill out your change control form, have you tested this? Yes, I did. It took me a couple of minutes. How much easier is that? You can use offsite clones to create high-quality dev test environments. And this is all installable in just a few minutes, and it's completely non-disruptive. Any VMware or Hyper-V admin can install this in less than 60 minutes. And you can use the free trial, completely non-disruptive, to see how this strategic hybrid cloud solution for BCDR fits into your environment and is going to allow you to evolve your IT. And the final point I want to give you is we also help you build the business case as to why you need Zerto to help you build this hybrid cloud architecture. So this is a free customized document that we can help you build, and we work with our partners and customers to create this, where we list out your current infrastructure, so all the VMs, the applications, the current SLAs, the multiple different technologies that you have in the stack to try and protect all of these. What is the current business impact of that downtime? The Zerto solution and the overview of how we're going to add value to this infrastructure and future-proof it, the return on investment of just one incident in the next 3 to 5 years and how Zerto is going to drive that cost down, how we're going to remove multiple different point solutions from your environment, and this is going to allow you to prove the need and get the budget to sign off and evolve your IT and put Zerto as the first solution in your environment, where then you can put in whatever hypervisor and storage or whatever cloud you want underneath, and Zerto is going to be the solution that allows you to do that. So the first solution, not the last. So if you're interested in that, again, you can contact Zerto, contact your partner, say, hey, I've heard Zerto do this business case, can you help me build one? And they will be more than happy to help you do this, because if you love this solution, I appreciate there's one thing between seeing something cool, testing something, and then actually getting the business sign-off for purchasing that. And this is what is going to allow you to get this purchased and installed and running so you can evolve your IT. So at that point, let's open it up to a general Q&A for the last few minutes. I can see I have 101 questions. So thank you everybody for attending. The sheer number of people on this webinar is scary and also pretty amazing. So it's amazing to see that after 5 years of selling this software, and it really is evolving to where our customers are going in terms of being able to replicate to all the different clouds now that we see this maturity in the private cloud stack. So the first question, very simple to get over, is what about physical servers? So I've talked a lot about hypervisors. I haven't talked about physical servers with good reason, because Zerto is hypervisor based. We only protect VMs running in a hypervisor, and that's VMware vSphere or Microsoft Hyper-V. So yes, we are looking at adding new hypervisors next year, but these are our two main hypervisors, and if this isn't a good use case for virtualizing a once physical workload, then I honestly don't know what one is. And a lot of physical workloads, yes, There might be licensing considerations, but quite typically it's just a legacy performance argument where they're saying, this didn't perform well when we last tried to virtualize it in 2009, and I think in 2016, vSphere 6, for example, there is no performance difference hardly between a VM and a physical server. Once you add in the benefit of Zerto plus virtualization, then for me, every workload should be virtualized, because that is now your barrier to being able to consume the hybrid cloud. Let's look at the next question. Very almost funny one, but it's a good one. So does the Zerto mobile app support Windows Mobile? Unfortunately, it doesn't. So it is Android and iOS only. And I'd be interested, though, with the future of Windows Mobile, the fact that it's probably just going to turn into full-blown Windows 10, and the fact that we're in Windows 10 via the browser then, and it's HTML5, then you could say maybe we already support it. But as for Windows Mobile today, definitely not. Next question we have is, can I do an in-place upgrade, or does Zerto need a new install? Yes, you can do an in-place upgrade to 5.0. You download the new installers, upgrade the Zerto managers in place. It does a quick restart of the service. Then you can upgrade the VRAs one by one, and it will just cycle through them, do a quick reboot. There's a short spike in the RPO, maybe up to a minute as it reboots, and then it comes back down to sub 20 seconds. Next question we've got, what partnership do we have with IBM? So we are a certified IBM solution for replicating into software, or now as we call it, the IBM Cloud. And for any environment wanting to protect more than 20 VMs to the IBM Cloud or between IBM Cloud data centers, Zerto is an IBM certified solution, and it is their recommended solution for protecting those VMs. Below that, they have some SMB tools. It's vSphere replication, doesn't have consistency groups, therefore doesn't scale, but above 20 VMs, Zerto is the solution, and it's already in their equivalent of the marketplace, so you can go and install that and purchase the software through IBM. Next question I have is, can I keep checkpoints in the journal beyond 30 days? No, you can't. The journal is a maximum of 30 days, but if you want to take copies of the data beyond that, there are two different mechanisms you can look at. Offsite cloning and offsite backups will allow you to take periodic copies of the VMs, maybe once a month, to a separate storage array, separate repository, so you can also then configure long-term archiving off the back. So I think there's around 50 other questions, and some of them are pretty long, and we definitely don't want to keep everyone on here longer than we need to. So for every single question that I didn't answer, I do have it logged. I will respond to you via email, via the email address that you registered via using for the webinar. And I just want to say thank you all so much for joining. I hope you had some fun. I hope you enjoyed the demo. We will be sending out this recording, and thank you very much for your time today. Enjoy the rest of your week, and hopefully we've managed to change your world a little bit in showing you just how powerful Zerto Virtual Replication 5.0 is, and the amazing things that you can do with this hybrid cloud architecture with our new exciting Enterprise Cloud Edition. Thank you very much. Have a good day.